I've always had this concern about results on the ground and at the same time the results on the ground feeding into policy. At that time you had a lot of think tanks who had very senior economists who would think through policy, come up with good guidelines, etc. But more often than not, those policies were disconnected with the ground level reality. If you're really wanting to work in the space of sustainability, you need to start with a sustainable company really at the end of the day. When we talk about India being an exporter of IT services and some health services, etc., I think we don't realize that we are probably in a position to be the best exporter of development sector practices also. India is on the right track when it comes to the fact that we are a growing economy, and that's where we have to keep that balancing act of being able to grow at a 7%, 7.5% kind of growth year on year. About 3 or 4 years ago, USAID actually said we are a climate finance entity which also does development. So that was the kind of positioning they'd taken. And similarly, a lot of other development institutions said we are number one priority is climate finance. We are in some ways, I would say, the very early stage of, I don't like to use that word, but deglobalization. Many countries are actually now wanting to look internally first. And that is why we are now seeing this tariff war and make in your own country and immigration rules, not only in US but other parts of the world also. AI can play a very major role, and you can look at first entry points, at the lowest level, at districts, at states, etc. Have AI actually clean up the data, evaluate, so that there is very little human intervention that is required. AI would also enable indicators being set which are measurable. What can't be measured or will never get monitored at the end of the day. So I think that's where AI will come in.
Welcome to another episode of Planet People Profit. I am your host Sudipto Dey. Social development projects often suffer from disconnects between policy formulations and what is implemented on the ground. Our guest Ashwajit Singh has been a pioneer in the social development space. He identified this gap early on. He started offering technical consultancy and implementation services to governments and to international bodies to help bridge this gap. Ashwajit Singh takes us through India's journey in enhancing impact measurement and in the lessons learned over the years in improving outcomes of development projects. Ashwajit, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sudipto.
I found it curious that you are one of the pioneers in this social development sector, and but you don't exactly have a background in this sector. You're not trained for social development, but actually you are a chartered accountant. You've been through you've done a company secretary. So how did you land up in this space, and could you take us through your journey?
Yeah, it's a very interesting journey I've had, and you're right. I mean, I actually, I'm a commerce background student. I was at the SRCC and then went on to do my chartered accountancy and company secretary right after graduation. It's a matter of chance that I got the INLAC scholarship and I went to do a master's at the London School of Economics. This is way back, many years ago. And that was the time that India was still a very closed economy, and this is pre-91, 92 reforms I'm talking about. And to everybody's surprise, I decided to come back to India, even though I got a couple of offers in London with work permits and all. But I wanted to come back, and I wanted to actually do something of my own. I mean, I had that passion or enthusiasm of wanting to come back. So I set up, a advisory firm, more in financial management at that stage, and that's when the reform started. So I was amongst the first to take advantage of the economy opening up, and we registered ourselves, and I set up a financial services and a merchant banking outfit. So I ran the company as an investment bank for nearly about a decade, and in fact took it public as well.
Okay.
And I was enjoying myself. I was, just in my early 30s, the promoter of a listed company, doing well. And then I think, a particular incident just sort of changed my entire outlook. I happened to be in Kolkata, in fact, near Barakpur, you're from there, so you'd know. And I was looking at an IPO of a jute factory.
Okay.
And right after the discussion, I walked around the factory, and I stumbled across the living quarters of the staff there. And I was aghast to see the kind of condition that they were living in, where, you had kerosene lamps outside every home. You had hardly a 10 to 12 feet sort of pavement to walk through. You didn't have proper water, and the waste of the jute mill, the black water, was the water that was being carried by the women. That was the same kind of water they were bathing in, washing their clothes, cooking their food, with no power, no electricity. I was absolutely aghast, and that's when I sort of just got thinking and thought to myself that I mean, how are we ever really going to get out of this situation? Who's responsible? Who's accountable? What are the policies? So I would say, if you ask me what was that moment that got me thinking to try and do something different, that was the moment. So I came back, I met a few seniors from the London School of Economics alumni, had discussions with them, people who were in the development sector, and with that passion I set up IP Global 26 years ago. And in the early days, we were absolutely small. We had no formal training or education in this, but I think what me and my team had was passion and sincerity. So it was with that junoon or that jazba that we really got started. And I think over the years, it's that passion, sincerity, and most important, to make that change happen on the ground, that really led to our growth and moving into different sectors. So it's quite an interesting journey for me to have gone through till now.
But you could have joined an NGO, you could have joined a civil society organization, do work on the ground. You could have gone that way too.
Yes, but I'll tell you, I've always had this concern about results on the ground, and at the same time, the results on the ground feeding into policy.
Okay.
So in fact, it's interesting you mentioned that, because, at that time, you had a lot of think tanks who, had very senior economists who would think through policy, come up with good guidelines, etc. But more often than not, those policies were disconnected with the ground level reality.
Okay.
And at the same time, you had NGOs doing good pieces of work in the community or education, who, while they worked well, they were very disconnected with the bigger picture or policy. So we positioned ourselves as a think and do tank.
Okay.
So we really set ourselves as an entity which would work in policy, but at the same time focus on implementation and results on the ground. So that's been our USP right through the years. And we've realized that working on the ground helps you in improving policy. Working at the policy level helps you in improving implementation. So I think that's the positioning we've done. The reason why we also didn't go for the NGO route is because NGOs very often are very largely dependent on funding and grants and tend to get a little complacent at times. Whereas if you're really wanting to work in the space of sustainability, you need to start with a sustainable company really at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So that's why we sort of set up a company. Now of course we do have a NGO also within our group, but we set up so that we could work as a professional organization, bring in the management expertise in this development sector space, which at that particular time lacked management expertise.
Interesting, but I'm pretty sure your training as a chartered accountant would have come in handy here.
Absolutely, I think as a chartered accountant, as a management person, economics, so and above all, numbers and getting the results and being able to measure the results on the ground. I think all that. See, any kind of education will come handy at some stage of your life. So, so I think that's what it all.
These are all life skills, which are like
absolutely, yeah.
Interesting, but that means you would have from those times, from late 90s onwards, 26 years as you mentioned. You would have seen the way India would have evolved in terms of the development projects, how the development projects have evolved, the deliverables, the issues which are faced, the disconnect between policy and the deliverables. How has sort of life changed from then and now? And I'm pretty sure you would have witnessed that transition.
Sure. So yeah, our journey is very much like even the journey of India. When we got into the sector, first of all, India neither had the greatest of policies or thought leadership, and at the same time, we didn't have the funding to really execute those.
Okay.
A lot of bilateral, multilateral companies which are governments which were supporting India at that stage came in with, more often than not, their own policies which they wanted implemented in India, which they thought were the best for India.
Okay.
many of these funds were tight funds. So if the UK government is coming in with funding, you would probably have a UK firm running that project. If you had say US aid or US government, it would be US, similarly Japanese. And also we saw that transformation where India neither had the funds nor the ability to execute.
Okay.
Now, over the years, I think that's a sector when we talk about IT revolution, we talk about industrial revolution in India. I think the development sector has also really revolutionized and changed in India. From being a recipient of money and technical expertise, over the years, India, through its own internal accruals, growth, etc., as you know, we are now amongst the largest economy in the world. Now we have a situation where the government has a fair amount of their own funding to spend. What we probably still lack, or I wouldn't say lack, but need some expertise is on the delivery side or the technical expertise side. And that's where the transformation has taken place, where the funding agencies or the international agencies are no longer giving financial assistance. They're only providing technical assistance.
Okay.
And today, India, when we talk about the SDGs, if I was to list down our policies, we probably got 2 or 3 policies, national level programs against each of the SDGs.
Okay.
And our programs today, our policies today are amongst the best in the world in the development space. The only challenge, of course, continues to be the delivery on the ground, because I'm a firm believer that if you have a mediocre policy which is well implemented on the ground, that's far superior to having a great policy which is poorly implemented. So I think now, increasingly, we see a lot of focus and effort now on results, on outcomes, on impact on the ground.
Okay.
Earlier, it was more about getting processes in place, getting institutions in place. Yes, institutions are important, but more important is to make sure that these institutions and the structures that are created deliver on the ground. So I think that's the transformation that's taken place. And today, a lot of India's policies, whether it's NREGA, whether it's smart city, whether it is the digital transformation, now are actually being looked at by other developing countries, be it Africa, be it Southeast Asia, as policies that they want to emulate and follow. So when we talk about India being an exporter of IT services and some health services, etc., I think we don't realize that we are probably in a position to be the best exporter of development sector practices also across.
Interesting. Okay. I'm pretty sure IP Global is in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. You see, as I mentioned, we are really a mission with a business, rather the business with a mission, and we realized very early on that the India experience is far more relevant outside India than say the European or the American experience, because the challenges we go through in terms of overpopulation, poverty, illiteracy, etc., similar challenges that are faced in other developing parts of the world. So we took a couple of decisions very early on in IP. One is that we will work across sectors. So we didn't limit ourselves to just a particular sector. So we work in social economic empowerment, we work in health, nutrition, water sanitation, we work in education, skills, climate, monitoring and evaluation, urban tourism. So we were able to make ourselves a multidisciplinary entity. The advantage with that is that when we talk about development sector, you can't isolate, say, climate from health, or health from water sanitation, or water sanitation from community. They all have to work hand in hand, and unless you have that kind of expertise in-house, you won't be able to really make change happen. The second thing we did is we decided to also go and work overseas, which was again something very rare for an Indian company, because we were not able to compete initially with companies in India itself, but now to go overseas. So we acquired a British consulting company a decade ago. We set up offices in Africa, in Nairobi, Addis Ababa, then Southeast Asia, Manila, Dhaka, Myanmar. So we started working, and today we've delivered more than 1,200 odd projects. We've got a team of over 1,000 full-time staff across the world, and we've worked in more than 100 countries. So I think the Indian experience is really seen as a very relevant experience in this space, and I think that's what we need to when we talk about South-South expertise, South-South partnerships, that is what India needs to project. And support other countries also in sharing some of their best practices in this space.
Interesting. So you're saying that after the IT revolution and the exporting the, I would say the social sector development experience is something that India should also...
Absolutely. See, again, I would in fact go to the extent of saying that we have a lot of competition now in IT revolution. You've got countries in Southeast Asia which are also now, being able to compete in IT. You have a lot of other countries. But when it comes to the social sector experience, best practices, I think India still is by far the leader in the world. Of somebody who's not only conceived these programs, but actually successfully been able to deliver them. The challenges is still a lot in India, but then you will see certain states, certain districts, certain municipalities where you've actually, been able to deliver well. So those are the practices which need to be taken in India at the national level and other parts, and then of course outside India as well.
Interesting. That means geopolitics plays a very important role in this whole, as you mentioned initially that, the flow of, when you started out, the flow of funds, like for the development sector, they were tied to the specific countries.
Yes.
And we see geopolitics now playing out currently, be it the USA or Europe or other places. Tell me, like, what has been the effect of, especially with Mr. Trump coming to power? He's announced that there'll be, slashing of US budgetary support to the social sector, and I remember like there were a lot of reactions initially. So how has that played out?
See, there will be a huge impact both in the short term as well as long term. First of all, I think even before he made these announcements, we have to realize that the SDGs, which are running till 2030, because of a number of reasons, have not kept pace, and it's only about 17% of the SDGs that seem to be a little bit on track, and most of the SDGs are much behind track. Most of the SDGs are in fact even some of them are even worse off than they were when the SDGs started. Even before this, there were the Millennium Development Goals, but that's again, the SDGs were far more ambitious. Now, the reason for the SDGs not being on track, of course, was the single biggest reason probably was the lack of finance, which was required for SDGs, because various estimates said that to meet the SDGs, you needed between 2.5 trillion to about $4 trillion a year. So nowhere near those figures were there. Then, of course, the second major reason was the conflict that we keep seeing across the world, because even within this sector now today, not only have there been budgetary cuts by some of the developed economies who'd signed up to the Paris Agreement, but there's also a lot of development fund now going into Ukraine, and you'll soon see a lot of that going to other parts of the conflict areas. Then, of course, some of these disasters or things that have happened, like COVID, now a lot of floods and monsoons, and where people, especially the vulnerable, they are the ones who get affected most. So a lot of funds go into this. So there was already a constraint of funding in this space. Now, US traditionally has been the biggest funder in the development sector, both for climate as well as other parts now. Now, USAID, as you know, has been wound up. At the same time, the US budget support to some of the multilaterals is being slashed. From what I hear, some of the UN agencies are going to be struggling for funds. WHO would be also impacted. So that is going to affect the sector. Now, of course, the way out of that is that, first of all, I think now one has to look at national and local funding. So the governments will need to step up. The Indian government has already started stepping up. We will need to step up more. You will need to look at more funding at the local government level. You will need to now maybe also look at being a little more efficient in your spending. You will need to get some funding from community as well. And I see a huge future for impact investing and blended finance as well. I see a huge requirement for CSR funding coming in. Now, again, take the example of India. Last year we had close to about 35,000 crores of CSR money. Now, if we are able to really, keeping in mind that we are a growing economy, if we are able to also use this CSR money more effectively, we are looking at tripling the CSR investments over the next, 5 to 7 years. Now, that money, if it can be leveraged and blended into money coming in from the government, money coming in from the community, money even coming in from whatever multilaterals and bilaterals, then you're talking of a few billion, a reasonable chunk of money going into this sector. So now the entire sector has to change from doing what you have been doing on your own to try and find ways to blend the finances, try and work in partnerships, try and leverage funding, and most important, every initiative, every program has to focus on impact and results. And that is why when you talk about blended finance or impact financing, you're also looking at some kind of a returnable grant or a returnable debt component in that, so that you are be able to get the impact and at the same time work towards sustainability. Now, I think free money it's the end of free money, really, if you ask me, and that's how it should really be, unless it's really the most vulnerable or the most needy who still require that. But it should be blended into part grant, part subsidized loan, part some innovative instruments, partnerships, leveraging.
When you say end of free money, and I presume with this current geopolitics, we're going to see more of that. How should Indian policymakers sort of prepare for this new era where you have, especially if you're in the social development space, when you have end of free money, you need to generate your own funds. As you said, we need to have more blended finance instruments. Are the policy instruments, are the policy tools, are they in place from India perspective? What is your take on that?
See, I spoke about one of my earlier experiences in the sector, and I remember when I first saw these slums, and I went around speaking to some of the people there, and I said that what kind of support do you need so that we can give you proper power, clean water, clean electricity. And so they turned around and told me, they said, give us jobs and we'll fend for ourselves. We don't want these free doles, we'd rather have livelihood. And that statement, even though that statement was more than 20 years ago, and I've heard it many times since then, but I think to me that is the final solution. So I think India's on the right track when it comes to the fact that we are a growing economy, and that's where we have to keep that balancing act of being able to grow at a 7%, 7.5% kind of a growth year on year. The last budget has made some good announcements about job creation, has made some good announcements on this internship policy. I think a lot of CSR funding should go into job creation, sustainable job creation. While I am all in favor of the direct benefit transfers or the cash transfers that are taking place to incentivize people, whether it's safe delivery, whether it is education. But at the same time, the long-term solution is that while the most vulnerable may still get this cash transfer, the long-term solution is to find opportunities of economic growth and livelihood. So if we are able to have policies around that, policies which see results on the ground, I think over a period we will get out of this vicious circle.
Interesting. We have COP30 coming up 2-3 months, I think November this year. How much of, and that's an annual event which we see that it gets a lot of media attention, there's a lot of high expectations, and then of course there are commitments made and deliverables are of course something which are always debatable. What is your take on how much of the impact have COPs over the years have had on the development sector?
See, COPs do play a role. Whenever we talk of any kind of behavior change or any impact on the ground, I think it first starts with identifying the need to do something, or starting with the thought leadership or making the policy. So COPs have, I think, played a very important role in positioning and getting climate to the center stage. I think, to me, that's the single most important objective that COPs have played over the years. It is, of course, there's a huge gap between the promises and the delivery.
Yeah.
Here again, funding being the single biggest reason, where you talk about a 1.3 trillion support that is required from the developed countries, and you end up not even getting 300 billion out of that. So funding is a big issue. The other, of course, big issue is that there is a conflict between the aspirations and the need of different countries. The developed nations, who have been traditionally the biggest defaulters, are wanting the other nations to look at ambitions and control that. But now that would have a direct impact in the short run on their industrialization and growth. So it's a where the interests very often are not aligned.
Okay.
So the moment interests are not aligned, people find ways of trying to get it around. You see, either you come up with solutions which are implemented. So there's always this huge gap. And of course, I think the fact that US is not going to be participating or showing any enthusiasm on COP, I think that itself has led to a lot of sheen being lost, because US, in terms of cumulative emission, is the number one country in the world. In terms of the current situation, probably just after China. So if they, and in terms of funding, by far the largest. So if they are not participating both in the policy as well as the funding, it's going to be a struggle to make things happen. Of course, certain things have been identified, talking about, in the earlier meeting, preparatory meeting at Bonn, you are talking about more focus around adaptation, which is important, more focus around, data, more focus around monitoring. So I think even if we start looking at getting those indicators in place, and also the fact that now you're going to be focusing on few indicators rather than just try and do everything there. So I think it's a step in the right direction, but still a lot of work to be done, and there will always continue to be challenges, more challenges now, given that US is not going to be participating.
But the fact that it's being hosted by a developing country like Brazil, for example, as part of BRICS, and India, of course, has got a very good relationship with Brazil going. You see that evolving over time? Do you see that something will come out of that?
Sure, I absolutely see BRICS or BRICS really evolving as a very important player in this entire thing, and I think that's where we need to focus more on the South collaboration.
Okay.
Because at one end you've got a very strong EU, at the other end you've got the US, and I think this is the third front, if I'd like to sort of put together, and we have aligned interests. All these countries are the ones which are wanting to industrialize, develop. They have similar challenges, and I think we do need to collectively demonstrate this strength, and even if it is working within BRICS itself and not so much through the formal bigger frameworks, it's worth us pursuing this.
Interesting. But in terms of messaging that comes out from COP, for example, some people have been commenting on the fact that Amazon rainforests have been sort of cut to make way for hotels in Belém, where the conference is being hosted. It sends out a sort of not a positive or the right signals. That if you're cutting rainforests down and you're talking about climate and talking about this, you think there's something needs to be done on the messaging part of COP, because from the person on the ground, if he looks at those messaging, there's something. Are these guys really serious about it?
See, I'll tell you, there will always be the people who are critical of these will always find something or the other. While I agree totally, messaging is extremely important, but like I said, that COP has also has played an instrumental role in positioning climate right at the forefront.
Okay.
In fact, it's interesting now that USAID is no longer in existence. It was about 3 or 4 years ago, USAID actually said we are a climate finance entity which also does development. So that was the kind of positioning they'd taken. And similarly, a lot of other development institutions said our number one priority is climate finance. Today, if you ask most of these development institutions to pick up maybe the top 2 or 3 of the SDGs, I can tell you that climate will be right there on top. So I think that realization has come. There will be, these incidents which should not be there. I'm not justifying that they should be there, but I think it's important that at least the result of COP should also be this clear messaging that climate needs to be addressed.
You work with a lot of international agencies. So have you seen a shift? Have you experienced the shift in the attitude post-Trump?
To some extent, yes. It comes in 2 fronts. See, first of all the developed economies had signed up to the Paris Declaration that they will commit 0.7% of their GDP to the development sector, or the ODA, overseas support. Now, 3 things have actually happened. First, that because of Ukraine, a lot of that funding has started going to that part of the world, even including the defense besides the humanitarian. And to some extent, that's affected the funding that would have otherwise gone in. Second is that we are in some ways, I would say, the very early stage of, I don't like to use that word, but deglobalization, where many countries are actually now wanting to look internally first. And that is why we are now seeing this tariff war and make in your own country and, immigration rules, not only in US, but other parts of the world also. We've seen Brexit happen as well earlier, and we're seeing similar things in other parts of Europe as well. So the moment that happens is one of the first cuts that people think of doing is probably support outside. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is that because of all these tariffs and a little bit of slowdown, there are economies that are moving towards a slightly slower down than what they were doing earlier. So the moment the pie itself becomes smaller, that 0.7%, which now is reduced to, in some countries, 0.4%, that further shrinks. So a lot of countries are now not honoring their 0.7%.
And that you think is a critical...
That's critical. It's basically, I think it's only the Nordic countries now, the Norways and the Denmarks and Luxembourg. They are the ones who are still probably the only ones who are now looking at the 0.7%.
So you see India impact of this? From an India perspective, have you seen any...
See, it will have, like I said, it will have a trickle-down effect on India, yes. I mean, but luckily, India has not been that largely dependent on the social sector. We may have still looked at them for renewals, for large ticket climate financing, etc., which would also get impacted. But on the pure development sector, I think the sectors in India which to some extent will get impacted, I think the first sector would be health. Because we were still getting a lot of expertise and support from some of the international agencies, including our fight against polio and TB and all, which of course is largely led by the government of India. But some of the technical expertise was being given by them. So I think, but luckily, because the government has its own schemes, whether it's Ayushman Bharat, whether it is the National Health Mission, whether it is the TB pledge, or whether it is the pulse polio, there is a lot of funding which is there within the government itself. So while it would see some initial, maybe setback in the initial days, but we have enough fallback or buffer to get over that. So I don't think that will be a long challenge. I think climate to some extent would also get affected, and then some of the I would say the technical assistance, because what happens is that again, and that's something which is we could even rectify our own procurement system of hiring technical assistance, etc. in India is a little slower in terms of appointing technical assistance, getting assistance even from outside if required, or by and large within there. And then even the payment within the government is not as efficient as when a donor comes in. So I think if we can clean up all that, we are still not really going to face so much of a challenge.
Interesting. Staying on India, the CSR regulations came in around 2009.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure as a business, as a company, you would have benefited from that because just like as a sector, I think we saw, as you mentioned earlier, that the CSR funds are from 35,000, it might grow 3 times over the next 3 to 5 years. Now, there's a lot of pressure on Indian industry now to look at net zero. We have our national goals also. How do you sort of look at the journey that these corporate India is taking on net zero, aligning that with CSR? Also, there are pressures on climate adaptation, on extreme weather issues. What has been your advice to corporate clients? How should they go about it?
Okay, a couple of things. I think on CSR, it's a great idea. The 2% CSR mandatory spend is a great idea. I think what needs to be done is also monitoring where is that money being used, and is it being used by all the entities. So I think that's something that the government could try and do. I think we, on a related issue, I think even the FCRA guidelines need to be, they've been very stringent, but we need to sort of, again have a relook to see that more funding does come in wherever required, especially in light of some of the donors not coming in. Of course, we should monitor them. Now on CSR, I think the starting point is that the corporates themselves need to be responsible. And when I say responsible in terms of climate related issues as well. They should be looking at their value chains itself, whether these value chain and the suppliers are compliant with climate issues, what are the kind of mechanism or structure they are using. We need to also try and the corporate themselves need to have programs around recyclable plastic, need to have programs around moving away from the coal-related work, trying to look at climate. They need to also look at issues around fair wages. They need to look around issues around skilling, because if we are moving towards net zero, we're also going to be looking at a lot of jobs being lost in the coal sector. So I think it's the CSR funding can be used for skilling those people in times to come. CSR funding should be used for, like I said, leveraging and blended finance, because when you are looking at big ticket, so they can come in and bridge the gap where some international funding would get reduced, and that's where they need to sort of look at this. And above all, I think a lot of corporates should also be looking at more innovation, science, technology. How do you get alternate products, alternate mechanisms of trying to address climate change as well? Right from creation of the infrastructure, are our buildings more climate resilient? Are they more eco-friendly? Looking at the entire ecosystem itself. So there are lots of things that they can do to try and work in this space.
But the corporate involvement in the social sector, I'm pretty sure from 2009 onwards, and in 2025 right now, you would have seen the involvement of corporate.
It has, yeah.
So how what's your take? How do you think going forward the corporate involvement will play out? You mentioned about the fact that there's need for creating more social capital in terms of in the social sector, more strong institutions in the social development sector. So you see more participation from corporates in that play?
Sure, I'll tell you. We've got a few institutions which have been set up now. Take the example of the Social Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
That was set up a few years ago. Great idea. The finance minister has, over the last 2 or 3 budgets, announced blended finance as a way ahead. Great idea. The CSR funding, of course, has already been announced. So I think what we now need to do is try and get these jigsaw pieces together.
Okay.
So you could have blended finance institutions set up. You could have them in the private sector. You could have it in the semi-government sector, where a lot of CSR money could come into this blended finance. So if you're putting in, say, 1 crore, you could probably be leveraging from other places, including banks, including private sector, including government. And with that same 1 crore, you could probably be doing projects of 10 crores. So that's the kind of leveraging that could be done. Then a lot of good initiatives in the social sector could actually be listed on the social stock exchange. Now, these are early days, but I would like to see a lot more happening through these institutional mechanisms, because what happens in that is that if you've got a transparent, regulated mechanism, then you have the trust, and even smaller players who may only be requiring to put in 1 or 2 crores in a year in CSR, they will also come in and be willing to chip in. So it's all about partnership and leveraging through CSR. But CSR will play a lot of role going forward in the social sector.
Of late, with the BRSR guidelines and everything, ESG has come into focus from the corporate standpoint. You see somewhere overlaps between ESG and CSR?
No, there's absolutely an overlap. I mean, in fact, unfortunately, a lot of boards and companies treat it as separate issues, but there is a lot of overlap, and I don't think one can be done without the other if you're really doing it in the true spirit. In fact, I keep giving this analogy that CSR is like a diet and ESG is like a change of lifestyle. So you end up using certain funds to achieve a particular objective. You're more focused on the outcome at that particular stage. You're doing it because you have to for regulatory purposes. Whereas ESG is something which is, and CSR you're doing for society, whereas ESG is something which you're doing for investors.
Absolutely.
You're doing to be seen as a responsible, compliant entity. You're doing it because you yourself want to cleanse yourself. You want to make it a sustainable model. So I think both have to go hand in hand. You can't be, CSR, if it's done as a one-off, will not have that sustainability, not have that long-term impact. Whereas ESG, if it's not done keeping in mind also doing good, it won't have that same impact. So they need to work hand in hand, of course.
So what would be your sort of advice to corporates be in terms of, if they are to get more engaged in, in development of, say, value chain, responsible value chain in the development sector? What should be the role of how do you envisage the role of the corporates going forward?
I would say that even some of our other established entities like, we have the Institute of Chartered Accountants, they could be doing, trained to do, more around a social audit. They could do a ESG audit. There are agencies which are doing these audits, but make it a mandatory thing, make it more required. And when we talk about these ESG audits, we need to look at the entire value chain. Are we using MSMEs? Are we using gender women-led organizations? Are we looking at environment friendly, ecosystem friendly entities? Are we ensuring that there is no child labor involved? Are we really looking at issues around timely payment of wages, minimum wages being done, fair trade practices? So I think all those issues have to be looked at if an entity really wants to comply with ESG.
Coming to something which has been buzz of late, use of AI. Each and every business is looking at how AI is going to impact them, and social development sector is also something where you see there's a scope for using technologies like AI for improving, say, outcomes, for impact measurement.
Absolutely. See, because today one of the biggest challenges in the development sector, including SDGs, including even direct benefit transfers, or looking at some of the government schemes, is being able to measure the impact in a scientific way. In fact, one of the complaints about the SDG rankings that is done by the UN every year is that how accurate is the data that is being used to evaluate and measure the impact.
Okay.
So AI can play a very major role, and you can look at first entry points at at the lowest level, at the districts, at states, etc. Have AI actually clean up the data, evaluate, so that there is very little human intervention that is required. That will increase the trust. That will also AI would also enable indicators being set which are measurable, because if what can't be measured or will never get monitored at the end of the day. So I think that's where AI will come in. Then of course, besides AI, a lot of technology in this space, whether it is now with the cash transfers, with e-paisa, with digital, the leakages or the possibility of leakages in transit has gone down a lot, and the turnaround time has also become very fast. So I think all those things are what AI can support. And when we talk about technology, be it technology in health, be it technology in safe delivery, be it technology in education, all those are going to effectively increase the efficiency of the development sector.
So from your own perspective, like have you been using tools like AI in IPE Global, like in terms of the way you sort of go out and do your measurement, do your execution of projects?
Yes, we do that, and in fact, very often our projects are actually measured by independent agencies. So that's actually a good way of doing that. But at our end, we will have dashboards. We will use as much of AI as we can to be able to get the indicators identified and fed in at the right stage. Because if the results are fed in at the lowest, at the community level or the district level, only then they'd be measured properly. So I think a lot of that is being done. Some of the programs that we've done, in fact, one of the again USA initiatives called Samrid, which in fact recently got the award earlier in Brazil, only this year, on the best innovative financing for sustainability. That has actually done blended finance and been able to leverage 15 times of the initial corpus, and invested in 95 entities. It actually started during COVID, but we were able to invest in 95 entities, many of them who were using AI, who are using the latest technology in the health space, which is now actually gone, and many of them have scaled up, many are working with the government, many have gone outside India as well. So that's something which impacted more than 60 million lives. So I think the programs like that, there are a lot of programs around, we've done some programs in Rajasthan, also around women health, on trying to address child marriages, trying to address deliveries, safe deliveries, etc. A lot of AI tools are being used in those programs as well.
Interesting. Finally, in terms of as we said earlier, that you've seen evolution of this sector, the social development sector, from those early days, from the 1990s till now. If you had to sort of pinpoint one or two things that has changed or transformed from then and now, what would those one or two things be?
I'd say opening of the economy, which was early days, 91, 92, even before I really got into the sector. That was the first trigger point. I would say, I think the strong democracy and the institutional arrangements we've got, and of late the very clear decision taking that we are seeing in India, I think that itself has transformed the sector, because you need decision taking if you really want results to happen on the ground. IT and now AI again is something which has increased the efficiency both of the government as well as the private sector. And I think the fact that we've also got a younger population, a population which is educated, passionate people. I would still say we work with people across the world, but the extent of passion, determination, maybe because we come from more humble backgrounds, that we see in people in India, that's something which should be emulated by the rest of the world. So I think all these things together has of course led to us being a consistently growing economy. So one thing leads to the other. It's like we were in a vicious circle. How do we get out of that vicious circle? So you need to address education, we need to address issues around health, poverty, and if we are able to get this all together, I think it's only a matter of time that we will. It's a big challenge, huge population, but we are slowly getting there.
And definitely going forward, as people talk about IT exports, at some point of time they'll be talking about social development sector services exports.
It's already happening. It's already happening. So I'm convinced it's a USP that India has. We are the big brothers in the development sector, and people do look up to us.
Great. That's a great point to. Positive point to end the note with this discussion, and thank you for the conversation.
Thank you so much,
for your
Sudipto.
time.
Pleasure being here.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.